All right. Now we're back up. Now we're running, and now we're actually functional.
Hey, we
Good
did it.
Lord. It's the good times. All
We're gonna
right.
make it.
Yeah, well, here's the awful part of this. Now I have to go into the dashboard and put the new stream in there.
Oh shit. Okay.
That'll happen. But that's not an issue. It takes me 2 seconds. Do, 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 do. There we go. All right. Now everything should work. Now everything should be working through.
We're off to. I mean, like the Blazers, we might need a little reset to start this off season.
Yeah, okay, that's good. He's back. And go ahead and get rid of you. And go ahead and get you out of there. Literally every single time. All right. So I guess we're just gonna run through these
Okay.
one at a time. But there is a truck load of questions, and I'm gonna try to keep these together, Steve. Where
Okay.
the big ones are going to be the coaching stuff, the group of free agents, trades, players, those kind of situations, and then we'll kind of go through it. Guitar stand, is that a PRS in the background? Yeah, that is. That's a Paul Reed Smith Santana in the background. It's one of my babies. I got a couple scattered around here that I haven't had nearly the amount of time to play that I want to. That is for damn sure. But we're going to kind of go through those groups one by one, and then kind of see where it goes. I guess that's the flip side of this is that I'm almost half tempted to just kind of wait for it just because I'm wondering if we're going to get more breaking news. Let's start with the leading, I don't know, the top of the pile at least, in Terry's thoughts being let go, and the coaching candidate search underway. What's your initial thoughts, initial takeaways? What are you looking at? What are you hoping to see happen? Just kind of 30,000 foot view, and then we'll kind of dive into the individual questions.
I think we're learning what it's like for the first time in 9 years to have a little destabilization in the organization. Yeah, just a little bit. I think, it's easy to say the grass is always greener on the other side until we're there. And I'm not saying that the Blazers aren't going to get this coaching hire correct. I don't think they were completely incorrect by making the change they did. Something did need to change.
It can always get worse.
That's
something I say it and people laugh, and I'm like, it can always get worse, guys. There are a lot of bad organizations out there.
So there's nobody. There's a couple names I'm surprised I'm not seeing, as far as Dave Yeager not being really included in this coaching search as of right now. At least,
yeah, that one caught me off guard too.
I also, I was a little surprised to see Juwan Howard's name on the list. I think that's a super interesting potential hire. He's done very well at Michigan. He spent a lot of time in that Heat system. And I mean, if you can't get Eric Spoelstra himself, you might as well get a guy from Heat culture and a guy who signed with the Blazers, who could potentially sell the Blazers organization as someone who signed here. And, some of these guys.
Somebody who actually knows the culture of the team, even if it has been a little while.
Yeah.
You can definitely understand who, what, when, where, why. It wouldn't be a shock to come here, so to speak.
No.
So, I think those are good things, at least in that regard, right? There's the whole idea of, somebody coming here who never been here as a former player, something along those lines. This is not my me throwing my hat in the race for Steve Blake, by the way, because I know some people. I've had a few people like, "What about Steve Blake?" Like, Steve Blake coming back to this franchise again would be moderately hilarious, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I definitely don't see that happening, but it would be funny. I'm not gonna lie. So, but sorry, I hijacked your thoughts.
No,
there.
no, you're good. I think there has been some lessons learned already early this offseason as far as making sure you think about what you're saying and who you're advocating for. Uh, I think,
You want to dive into that one right off the gate?
I mean, it's the elephant in the room. I
Okay,
mean,
let's hit it.
Jason Kidd obviously has so many non-starters for this fan base and for this organization, and not only, I mean, it makes it sound like I'm understating his domestic violence history, I am not. That is at the forefront of everything here. But also just as a coach,
Yeah,
he's
you
not a
don't
good
even have to get to the grotesque stuff. Is basically what you're saying. It on the surface level basketball stuff, it's problematic.
Yep. It's and just from a power struggle and what he's tried to do at organizations. If you're talking about a new ownership, fairly new ownership group, a GM that could be in flux, it's definitely feeling the pressure. I don't know if adding Jason Kidd into the mixer is necessarily the wisest move.
It's not like he's tried to install a queue anywhere before.
Yeah, and so then you get to just this goes against everything this city stands for, this fan base stands for, and really people in general. The culture has changed across the country. I mean, domestic violence is at the forefront. Listen to women and everything, and this just runs very counter to that. And I think the Blazers fan base, which has been so special, is I think just my experience with it is it is a very inclusive group. And I mean, shit, you did your show with Tara for a very long time. You've had. And I think Portland has always been a very inclusive place for female voices. And I just think that hire has no business in Portland with the Blazers. So,
and that's the thing. I'll kind of put my 2 cents on this real quick. For Dame to use his leverage for literally the first time in his career publicly to go to bat for Jason Kidd was stupid. Mm-hmm. I'll call it what it was. It was stupid. He has to know better. Like, that's Dame's authentic, but he's also very, very, very curated in that he doesn't just do stuff off the cuff. That is, what makes him authentic is that he's true to his brand and who he is with the decisions that he makes.
Yeah.
I have to hope to God that he was just oblivious and did not know Jason Kidd's history. That is the only way in hell that this makes any kind of sense. I don't care if he grew up in Oakland. I grew up with a lot of dudes in Southern California that I want to punch in the face. I'm not vouching for him because we're from the same neighborhood. Like, I don't care. I don't care if we went in the military together. There's plenty of a-holes that I know from the military. There's plenty of a-holes in the military that I punched in the face. Like, it's... just because that makes sense in that vein doesn't make this make sense. And that's before touching the basketball stuff. Mm-hmm. He has failed upwards everywhere he has been. Mm-hmm. Whether it be Brooklyn, whether it be Milwaukee. And let's not forget how he got to power in both those organizations. It wasn't a kumbaya, bring everybody together moment. It was very divisive. You were either in Kidd's inner circle and safe, or you weren't, and you got trucked. Mm-hmm. There's nothing. There are people that cover the Lakers that have reached out to me who believe that part of what is happening right now is Jason Kidd trying to instill another coup by leveraging this situation and going after the Lakers' job and forcing Vogel out. Which is, I think, a lot of people thought was going to happen in the first place. Because, remember, Kidd was on Braun's shortlist. And management brought in Vogel as a stabilizing force. So when this is all said and done, here's the thing. I think a lot of what you said is absolutely true. No, everything that you said is true. But I think the important part is this city, this community, they won't stand for this crap. Mm-mm. This organization is so terrified of the Jailblazer years that they have not hired anybody with a spotty past, let alone DV, just nastiness. Mm-hmm. Let's go ahead and paint the ugliness here. And here's I don't say this very often. The trigger warning. Yep. The dude kicked a pregnant woman so hard she pissed blood.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Point blank. And I know people want to say that, and this is something I struggle with. What is the statute of limitations on having that held against you? And I think Dave did a really good job. If you haven't read the piece, go read the piece, of kind of encapsulating that. I don't think anybody is saying that he shouldn't be allowed to work. But these jobs, these 30 jobs in the NBA are the top of the top, and you are very public. So every time you step on the floor, there's somebody somewhere that may be finding out about what you did for the very first time. And I don't think you are able to have that right. I don't think that's something. There are some things that you can forfeit in life by making a mistake 20 years ago. And it sucks, but that's the reality. So to kind of roll everything back on it, there is no way in hell Jason Kidd is going to be a coach of this franchise. Whether or not Dame wants, I know people are like, well, what if Dame's? I don't care. I don't care.
Yeah.
There's just no way it's going to happen. This community will not let it happen. There are, like, the fact that poll that you put up, which I think had roughly 40% of people pushing back against it, that lets you know right away. It's not like if he was Phil Jackson light, like you might be able to thread that needle with some folks, but he's not. He hasn't been successful anywhere. So you don't even have to get to the nasty stuff to be like, yeah, no, it's fine. Don't bring him here. So I guess that's my 2 cents on Kidd. Where I think it gets dicier is Chauncey Billups, right?
Yeah, and it's just something where I will be honest. I was blissfully ignorant on that circumstance.
You're not alone, by the way.
And I mean, the second it was brought to my attention, I did the reading and went through it, and that also is some behavior that can't be tolerated. And now all of a sudden, Chauncey Billups not being a head coach makes a lot more sense in a lot of ways, because he's been a name that we've continually heard around the league, and it's always kind of, well, why doesn't he have a coaching job yet? Well, it's pretty clear, and if you want to talk about reading something that has severe trigger warnings, it is the recounting of what went on there. And yes, he was never convicted, but him and Ron Mercer definitely settled out of court, and it was a nasty situation.
So I wasn't aware of the Billups stuff until last night. And this is where I'm probably going to get myself in trouble a little bit, because there's a difference between criminal law and civil court. It doesn't make one thing better than the other, but we do. You don't have to. I do. I look at things differently between civil court and criminal court, and what you can and can't assume. Criminal court says you did X, so you do Y. Civil court, even as nasty as it is, and it's nasty, it's not even nasty. It's beyond nasty. We don't get to see what comes out of that. And I think that's where you have to kind of you stop and take a look at it and go, what just happened here, or how is this functioning? I think it's kind of an issue as far as how that plays out. I don't like it. That's for damn sure. But the flip side of it is, I don't know, because even though there's an accountant of what allegedly took place, there's no conclusion that we can readily see. And because we're talking about 1997, it's hard to know without having a court of law carry that through what that means.
I kind of cut out there for a second. I had a little Wi-Fi issue, but I just want to be, I think I know where you're going with this, and I do see what you're saying, but also around the same time, because now where we are, I went back and you're Googling every coaching candidate with, all these terrible things attached to it in your search history. And at the same time, you have something going on with Juwan Howard, Chris Webber. There's a rape allegation. It was at Juwan Howard's house.
Yep.
Very different set of circumstances as far as how it was handled in the court of law. It was dismissed, and then Juwan Howard actually filed a lawsuit went back for defamation against
countersuit,
countersuit and won that. And that's a lot different ball game when you're looking at that, as far as not only was it never a criminal charge, but actually Juwan Howard fought to go back and get his name cleared and vindicated.
Yeah.
And that, the Chauncey Billups thing, I don't know. It's a different animal for me, and it's an avoidable mistake. It's as far as the organization, it is something you can avoid and don't shoot yourself in the foot. And also, I want to be very clear: we are two very white dudes talking about some very sensitive things, and I don't want to mansplain anything, gaslight anybody.
Nope.
Nothing.
And that's why I walk around it, because I don't. And there's two things that I understand when it comes to this stuff: the difference between criminal court and civil court. That's as far as I go with this, and that's why I don't try to tell anybody how to feel or what to feel. It's just my thoughts, my opinions on that. And it's not, and I'm not saying that because I'm like, well, Chauncey's okay. Like, I didn't know this stuff until last night, and reading it, it's not for the faint of heart.
No,
I'll be honest. So those two guys, I will say this: the picture of Jason Kidd with a mugshot, I think adds a level to it because of how violent and grotesque the reports were. Kicking a pregnant woman and pleading out is very, very different than settling in civil court. And again, this doesn't excuse anything, but when we're talking about levels here, there are levels to this, even if it is grotesque. So let's get to the other side of this. We're talking about coaching stuff, because there's no way Portland can hire and justify Jason Kidd. I think there is a way they can thread the needle with Chauncey Billups. And whether or not you agree with that, that's the reality. I think that you can justify it, mostly because it's probably not as well known. So the flip side is, you go a little bit further. If you're not going to hire those guys, who do you hire? Right?
Yep.
If you're not talking about those guys, who are you looking at? I know we've said Juwan Howard, and should we just go out and eliminate the guys that we know aren't involved?
Well, yeah. I think if you're looking at what Jeff Van Gundy has done in the last decade, I think
15 years. That's how long it's been since he's coached.
Itself.
Yeah.
Like, I was drinking like Ice House Big Dogs in college last time Jeff Van Gundy
I quote tweeted it with a picture of me in the Air Force from I think it was like 2 years before last time Jeff Van Gundy coached.
Yeah.
So I look like I ate that guy. So let's go ahead and throw JVG. Let's put him in a can and shooting him into the sun as far as a candidate's concerned. Juwan Howard, with Juwan, I like him. I have very little faith in him, number one, coming to the NBA for the Portland Trailblazers. But if you're going to pull that string, that comes from the whole idea of being here and knowing the community and having some familiarity. So as far as talking about small market, but here's the flip side. His sons are playing for him at Michigan. He is a god at Michigan. He has the top recruiting class in the country right now. That's a hard thing to walk away from when you're talking about the whole idea of bringing somebody in, if this was a title contending team. Like, if they made a monster move in a trade and landed that dude, then I think you could be like, well, that's a title ready chance for Juwan. He might take that swing.
And just going back to his relationship with Michigan, I mean, he's been a repairer of a lot of relationships there, as far as Jalen Rose being back in the building and
maybe
really
even
just
Chris soon.
Yeah, and just making amends for that whole era of that team, and he's the conduit for all of that. I will say, I think Juwan Howard not only does he make a lot of sense as far as what the Blazers want to do as far as pursuit goes, because as we've seen in the chat here, Eric Spoelstra is the name on the tip of everybody's tongue. And I think if you can't get Eric Spoelstra, you can get Heat culture by going and getting Juwan Howard. He's a guy who spent a lot of time as an assistant there. And I think he's had a front row seat. He cut his teeth as far as what he learned next to LeBron James, next to Eric Spoelstra, next to Pat Riley. I think he brings a lot of valuable experience. And I think just for a voice for Dame, as Juwan's career turned into that journeyman style arc, he can talk to Dame about, grass isn't always greener on the other side, or CJ or Yusuf Nurkic. Now, granted, he is a blank slate as far as what we know, what he would try to do at the NBA level, but hopefully, college coaches, whether it's recruiting and managing everything else, you get really good at delegation. And hopefully he would do that at the NBA level as well and put people in the best positions to succeed as an organization.
I think that's a good way to look at it. I would definitely be a fan of Juwan. There's no doubt about that, and I think he has the cachet at multiple levels to be able to be that dude. And I think that's something you're definitely looking for when you're talking about Damian Lillard and getting him involved. I saw this pop in on the Twitch chat, Zigtastic82. Who cares? He's been around the game. I'm assuming you're talking about Chauncey in that regard, because I think that's what we're talking about then. Here's the thing, man, and this is, I think that something that needs to kind of be held true, is that I saw this organization kowtow and fold to 100 people protesting Leupold Stevens being a sponsor of this team. And they are loosely, tangentially associated with selling scopes to the Israeli army. Whether or not you agree with that or not, they are very much aware of their presence in this this whole situation. Oh, you're talking about Van Gundy? Listen, man, there's nobody that wants to see him coach again among the players. I'm just telling you. It's just I've gotten that feedback. So anytime, let's do a quick peek behind the curtain with this stuff. Anytime you see a guy who hasn't been coaching for a really long time, all of a sudden get their name thrown and stuff, it's either their agent trying to keep their name out there, or they're doing them a favor with their current job. So every time you do that, you go into your next negotiation for your TV contract, and you say, hey, listen, I'm going to need a few more zeros attached to that number. Otherwise, I'm going to head out the door and go coach again. And that ends up bringing that back in. And I know he coached USA basketball, and so did Coach K. You see Coach K out here coaching in the NBA? No, you don't. That's the thing. There's levels to this stuff, and they also, that is not the commitment that anything along those lines.
Just real quick though, I think what the avenue we were going down is names we could eliminate, and I obviously we got sidetracked on Jeff Van Gundy. I think the other name obviously we're going to talk about is Mike D'Antoni.
Yeah.
And I was really ready to completely dismiss this idea, but I don't know if you checked it out yet. I aggregated it on Blazers Edge today, but Kevin Pelton actually kind of put together the most compelling case you could make for Mike D'Antoni. I think if it's not D'Antoni, I think it's an interesting thought experiment for the Blazers coaching search. It doesn't always work out if, hey, the Blazers need to address their defense, let's hire a defensive-minded coach. That doesn't always work. Basically, historically, it never really works out the way it is intended to.
You need the personnel unless it's Tibbs.
It takes a while for it to turn around, exactly. And kind of just leaning into the strengths, I mean, it's the microcosm of what the Rockets decided to do in 2016 as far as instead of just completely retooling everything, you just leaned into James Harden in an offense first approach and went Mike D'Antoni.
And you switched the cross. Listen, if you got Mike D'Antoni in his offense, but you got Bzdelik to come with him, that's the key.
Yeah, I want to see Melo and Bzdelik be in the same room again. That's what I want to see.
Listen, that's the other part of this. You get D'Antoni, there ain't gonna be no Melo in Portland, unequivocally. Listen, I'll put this out there. I don't think Melo's coming back next year. Anyways, he's 37 years old. Let me make sure I hit on the comments here. Any other good up and coming college coaches besides Juwan? Here's the thing. Unless it was like a Gary Payton type, again, Oakland ties, point guard, respect for Damian Lillard, all those kind of things. He just picked up at a smaller college I want to say in Linwood, in California, but I can't remember who it was. But
Lincoln.
Lincoln, that's what it was. Yep. But they're also looking for somebody with a bit more experience. I think that's the way they're going with that.
Yeah. I would say a name, I don't know if it's going to be this hiring time, but Mike Boynton for Oklahoma State is a super interesting up-and-coming name, which I don't know if he's quite ready to make that leap into the NBA, but he's a lights out recruiter.
A little bit more dusting on him before he's
Yep.
entirely ready.
He's a guy I'm monitoring as far as I think he might be the next coach that makes that leap out of the college ranks.
If you get Cade Cunningham to come to Oklahoma State, you're doing something well.
Yeah, exactly.
Like even if it is, you're just really good at hiding the bag. Like that's important. I'm being dead serious. Like that just shows you're very inventive with how you handle things, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Strife free. I made a joke about it, but I highly enjoy Juwan just for the sake of Listen, Jalen Rose and his perfect hairline being supportive of the. Think how tight a pinwheel cut into his head would look. That would just. I'd be all about it. Okay, so we're talking about eliminating coaches. I want to get on with Ime here. So I don't know why, but his name disappeared from head coaching searches about 18 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
I have not been able to get clarification on that. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't want to do it, or people believe he can't do it. I don't know what it is. I like Ime. Obviously, he's a local guy, Portland State guy. He may just be a career assistant. That may be the case, or there may be something in the background. Again, I'm not trying to insinuate that there is. I just don't know.
I think, and you can attest to this, I think it's with any job, especially when you're in that kind of that middle management area, is once you lose momentum and there's only 30 of these jobs, it just kind of stalls out for you. And that's when you get into that, the career assistant range where it's, I think we're seeing that with Nate Tibbetts. I think we've seen that with David Vanderpool, and I think we've seen it with Ime here. They just got to find that right situation where they can step in potentially as an interim or somewhere and break into the league that way. Because I don't think he's just going to get outright hired somewhere. And I think I don't know if it's anything that he's done because he's been in winning organizations.
Yeah, literally nothing but winning organizations.
I think Udoka is very interesting to talk about because I think it answers another question. As far as Becky Hammon has always been a topic of discussion with the Blazers. And here's why I think Udoka is important here.
Yeah.
Is Udoka was one of the hottest rising names in the coaching search. And once it became clear that Becky Hammon is the heir apparent in San Antonio, all those guys cut bait and left.
What? Yep.
I mean, you had Tim Duncan step away from coaching. You had Udoka leave. And Brent Barry really pivoted and focused right onto a front office role.
TV and front office. He was.
And so I think it's a two-part way when you understand what Udoka did and where Becky Hammon stands. And it's not that I don't want to see Becky Hammon in Portland. I think she's going to be a damn fine coach. But
there's just a 0% chance.
I think she's going to be a damn fine coach in San Antonio.
Yeah, and that's for everybody who keeps saying this and keep coming at me. For the love of God, please read like one of the 47 tweets that I've done on this, or comments in the comments section. It's not that Becky's not qualified. It's not that that the Blazers wouldn't love to have her. There is a 0% chance that she is leaving San Antonio. It is made abundantly clear. Do not ask. Do not come knocking on their door. They are paving the road for her. And for everybody's like, well, maybe they should, maybe just go talk to her anyways. No, staying in San Antonio is an organization that is rebuilding, with an organization that is familiar with you, that is building everything around you, that is giving you the best possible chance to succeed, to building an infrastructure around you, to uplifting you and putting you in the perfect position to be the first female head coach in the NBA. There is a 0% chance that she will leave that she should leave that. Because they are doing everything to make sure that she is successful, because she's going to have to break barriers that nobody else has. And in order to do that, they're going to line it all up for her. And she's going to be good. But they're going to make sure she's good by laying that foundation for her. She comes to Portland, she's got to win day one.
Yep.
She's got Damian Lillard's prime career. And if she isn't successful, she could set other female coaches back unfairly. That's why you will never, ever, ever see it.
Yeah, you don't want to break through the glass ceiling only to fall back down and potentially seal it back up for somebody else. And I'm not saying that would be fair, because it certainly would not be. But I think you hit on an excellent point there. And I just think Becky Hammon, everything, like you said, everything has been set up for her to be the next head coach in San Antonio. And I think that time is approaching very quickly.
It may happen this offseason. I've heard rumblings, so it hasn't happened yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if we got into around draft time and Pop decided, I'm good.
Yep.
So we got a couple other questions in here. Who's on the level of Steve Nash? Looks like he's doing a decent job for the Nets. Guys.
Give me 3 MVP level players, and I could probably
Give me 3 Hall of Famers in their prime. And that's not to take away from Steve. Steve is a likable dude who doesn't also have a history of beating women, which let's go ahead and look on their bench too. Their assistant coaches, it's nothing but former head coaches. And then he brought along guys like Sean Marion and Amari Stoudemire. Like, he brought in his boys who have experience. And Steve Nash is going to walk into that huddle, and Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden are going to know he's about that grind. You're talking about an MVP.
Steve Nash said that also the benefit of playing in Brooklyn, where the Knicks are in a resurgent year. You get these MVP level players, and all the pressure is off. There's zero pressure in that Brooklyn job. And that is huge for these first-year coaches, which I don't think that's something that whoever it is, the new Blazers coach, is not going to be afforded that same luxury. So you need to make sure that that is a point that is addressed in this next hiring.
And I think that's an important distinction. This job is not going to be a low-pressure situation. You are being handed Damian Lillard's last 3 prime years. The expectations are they are up. Don Nelson, listen. Everybody loves Nelly. There's no doubt about it. But he is not coming out of retirement. He has got his weed farm in Hawaii, and he's living the life. Grease back hair, tequila, and rolling a fatty. Like, he's good. What about Kenny Atkinson? So let me go ahead and roll this back again. Peel behind the curtain. The list that I gave to Steve and Dave, our editors, probably 2 months ago, Steve, was Chauncey Billups, Kenny Atkinson, Dave Yeager, and
who was it?
There was 4 coaches on it, but Atkinson and Yeager.
Did you already? I think you might have had Mo Cheeks and Nate on there.
Oh yeah, Cheeks and Nate, because they weren't sure what they were going to do with Nate in Atlanta. They hadn't. I don't think Lloyd had been fired yet at that when I said it to you. Yes.
Yeah.
So
it was right. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those wondering, Stotts has been fired for 90 days, maybe longer. So for anybody wondering why I kept alluding to it, changes are coming. So the whole idea of and here's the thing, and I'll draw the line. If you know who Warren Legary is, he's the biggest power broker in the NBA for coaches and executives. He is Terry Stotts' representative. He is Neil O'Shea's representative. He is Kenny Atkinson's representative. He is Dave Yeager's representative. If you look at the lineage of coaches and GMs in Trailblazers history, there's a Warren Legary line written through it all. Whether it's Chad Buchanan, whether it's Kevin Pritchard. I think it started after Whitson is when it goes back to. But almost every single modern era GM or coach that has come through has been a Warren Legary client. And so if you ever want to know if the Blazers are making a change, which way they're likely going to go, you look at that list. Yeager is also friends with Neil O'Shea, and I've heard that there's a little bit of a relationship that exists with Kenny Atkinson. I would be okay with both those guys. I will say this. I have heard Yeager is a grinder of a coach, bit of an a-hole, which I can sympathize and empathize with. Atkinson is another guy who coaches. I think he's a bit in the mold of Quinn Snyder, where it's just intensity all the time, which I tend to like. And I think that would be when you go from one to the other, right, Steve? The player's coach who's a little bit laid back. Atkinson's definitely, I think, a lot more demonstrative, right?
Yeah, I never. His MO was kind of, he was on that spectrum. He has definitely leaned a little further away from the player's coach side of things.
So I think it's one of those things where I think there's going to be some candidates here that are going to surprise people in the end. And one thing we have to keep in mind, when you see things discussed publicly in the Portland Trailblazers, they both look like coke dealers. There's no doubt about that. I'm not going to fight against that. Quinn rubs his nose and his lips with like an absolute psychopath. God bless him. He's a psycho, and I love him. But when we're talking about coaches and we're talking about the Portland Trailblazers, we're talking about anything in the Portland Trailblazers. If it's being discussed in the open, chances are there's not a ton of smoke behind that fire. I will say this. When the list came out from Woj, immediately the Jeff Van Gundy, Mike D'Antoni stuff was like, oh, cool. Those are agent favors. That's what those rang as. And if you noticed, Jason Kidd was not on that list. So, and again, if you don't know, Woj is the direct line to Neil O'Shea. That's where it exists. Woj, Zach Lowe, Dwight Jaynes. Those are the three. If it comes from those three guys, you know who it came from.
I want to go back to Dave Yeager real quick.
Go.
And get your thoughts on it. As far as a good friend of supports Blazers Edge content and messages me all the time is Jonathan Sharks. Messaged me, started talking to me about, who do you think it is? And the name I consistently go to is Dave Yeager. And he brought up some really good points that I hadn't really thought about. One is Damian Lillard would be far and away the highest class of player level star-wise he's ever played with. That is a hurdle he has never had to navigate. Mm-hmm. The other thing, though, is if you're looking at a guy who can reinvigorate, re-engage Yusuf Nurkic, it's got to be Dave Yeager.
Remind me of the big men that he's worked with?
Exactly. I mean, imagine running an offense through Yusuf Nurkic in those non-Dame minutes, or finding a way to balance those two and using him like Marc Gasol and
Marc Gasol,
or Zach Randolph,
DeMarcus Cousins.
Exactly.
Weird.
Just a gorgeous list.
Yeah.
So I think it is worth mentioning Dave Yeager in this conversation, but I do think it would be kind of awkward for Damian Lillard has only had one head coach in the NBA. Dave Yeager has never had a player at the level of Damian Lillard. That might be a rough adjustment period for those two guys.
Yeah.
So
no, it makes sense. Yeah, it's definitely one of those situations. And I missed this one earlier from Nibble. Dana Altman.
I want Mark Few then. If we get Dana Altman, we get Mark Few.
Let's be honest. Those two guys aren't leaving those castles. Dana might leave if if Roy Williams retires. Otherwise, he gets to rule that roost that is Oregon. He's there. He's not leaving that job for an NBA job with a ton of pressure. I think he goes to a college job that has a ton of pressure, but he's going to have the cachet of like, oh, this is ready made for me.
Yeah.
So, one that did pop open. I see yours, Alonzo. I'm going to hit yours next. What about Steve Clifford? With Steve Clifford being let go, I'm willing to bet money that Terry ends up in either Indiana or Orlando. He's going to be in one of those two places. There's almost no doubt in my mind. But I'm
going to sneak out and go to the bathroom real quick. You keep talking.
Okay, there we go.
Too many White Claws.
Listen, this is a White Claw friendly. I went bang this time, so I needed the caffeine and not the alcohol. Where we're here talking to a towel. But yeah, guys, I'm not entirely against Clifford, but I think he's a bit in the mold of Terry Stotts, where he's a bit more of a likable guy who falls more offensively. I just don't think when we're talking about the Blazers, they're going to look at coaches that are much more, a little bit more rigid, I think. And if they're not rigid, they're going to be player friendly in the sense of a former player. So that's how they're going to walk that line. So Luke Walton, Alonzo, I'm going to go ahead and say no. God, no. Please, no. I despise him as a coach. I think he's another guy who's just been wildly unsuccessful and hasn't gotten as much out of his guys as he should. His situation with Sacramento, the constant infighting that we hear about, stuff like he doesn't have a firm grasp on guys. Guys like Marvin Bagley are consistently, able to cause problems, and it's not good. So yeah, Indiana Stotts connection seems good.
I come back and you're talking about Marvin Bagley. This is not good.
Yeah, no,
this took a turn for the worse.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about Luke Walton and how his inability to contain that locker room.
Oh,
which I mean, it's true. He's been really bad in that regard, especially. Wayne Tinkle. Hey, listen, man, don't mess with the tank. I love me some Tinkle. I think we covered all of the. Here's Corey. Number one, I hate that idea of swapping Dame to see him compete somewhere else. Please God, no. So I hate that. You're on that same side, right, Steve?
Oh yeah.
Like
I think it's like this weird thing Blazers fans do where it's like, why can't we compete for a title? Like my thing is like people are so ready to let's trade Dame so he can
to Clyde
compete.
Drexler him. Yeah.
And I'm like, no, why don't we just try to just win it here? Like that would be cool too. Teams can do that.
But here, I'll give you guys this because you said swap Dame for Ingram. Here's the thing, and this is the first time Steve is just now hearing this because I got this text literally about 30 seconds before we started. From what I've been told, the Pelicans are shopping Ingram, that he doesn't want to be there. So maybe there's an outside chance a package CJ Cove, Nasir in a first kind of deal lands you in Ingram. I don't know. That's still. Does that sound like enough to you?
I like overvalue Ingram so much that it's.
Well, I mean, it's a 6'9" scorer. Like,
yeah, and he's the ideal fit. Like, if you're looking at people to put next to Damian Lillard, not only can Brandon Ingram create for himself, he's also a lengthy defender. He's super comfortable in a bunch of different situations, and he is incredibly young. That I think he is going to hit another gear completely. I just know that when I talk to our good friends with the Pelicans, Ollie Cassell, Preston,
yeah,
and Kevin Barrios, like when we talk to those guys, they laugh at us every time we bring up CJ McCollum for Brandon Ingram. So I'm wondering what a trade would look like, but also if you're mentioning, if he wants out, that changes the calculus of everything.
That's the ticker.
And also, I think. And it's something that Bill Simmons has touched on too, is Brandon Ingram, I don't think truly understands the hierarchy of where he falls in line with that Pelicans team. Where
he is always going to be number 2.
Yeah. And rightfully so. I mean, you have Zion Williams in there. Yeah.
So listen, these are the kind of situations where if you're the Blazers, you go all in on. Like if the package is what I just said, CJ Cove first, Nasir, you do it. You make the deal, and now you've got to sign Norm. So you've got Dame, Norm, Ingram, insert guy here, Nerk. Mm-hmm. And if you don't believe Nerk is that guy, the way that, and then I think we're going to transition here to a little bit of a trade free agency kind of talk here. Actually, we'll do that and get into these freaking questions because there's so many of them.
Let's crack it open.
My guy is Miles Turner.
Hey,
that's if Nerk is not going to be the guy. I know the Pacers are shopping him. They want Sabonis to be the 5. They'll look for a rim protecting 4 to play alongside him and try to figure it out in that regard. So I think this is a good overarching way to start. This is from Chris Peerboom at CPBoomer77. Pretend you are Olshey. What are your moves this offseason? What would your ultimate lineup rotation be, assuming reasonable trade scenarios? I grant you the power of the Po Bono. What are you going to do here, Steve?
My soul has been crushed in the last year, so I don't know if I'm the right person to ask. I'm going to give you a lot of really uninspiring things.
I keep getting punched, and I just keep getting off the mat.
I think... Obviously, name you already mentioned, you got to re-sign Norm. Norm is priority number 1 before you even start.
What's the number that you're at?
Hopefully the Knicks don't get too greedy. That's what my number is. I think.
I know you believe in that Knicks number way too much.
Yeah. Hollinger put that out there, and I've been losing sleep over it ever since. I think it's probably you're looking in the $19 to $23 million range, I would say.
22 is where I keep landing.
His postseason might have tempered some of it. So after that, I think it's just trying to maximize value for CJ McCollum and see what you can get out there. I don't think it necessarily has to be a perfect fit. I would be interested to see if they can get a asset, and something that you've talked about, get an asset that could grease the wheels for a three-way trade. Because I don't think there's a team out there right now that is a CJ McCollum away from anything.
Yep.
And that's what you have to try to negotiate and see what you can get there and grease the wheels for a three-way trade. I love Miles Turner. That is a name I was going to bring up tonight. I think just what he can do, and potentially if Robert Covington is still there, you have two dynamite weak side shot blockers that can, or weak side defenders that can come and switch and
switchable.
Help.
You can play various defensive schemes with.
And I love that pairing. It's not that I don't love Nerk, but I think it might be time for Nerk to explore his options elsewhere. And then it's just, you got to find consistency and length. And that's my main goal as I approach the offseason, is guys who you can depend on to play inside their roles, but also have size that can create mismatch problems. There was a lot of problems that the Blazers faced against the Nuggets, but one that was consistently apparent every time they were on the floor is there was a serious size disadvantage almost at every position. And that's something that you can address with not even the most flashy moves.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and somebody else, I just saw it pop up hilariously. It's something that I've thrown around the Blazers Slack channel for a while. Where was it? I think it's something about a three-way Boston, Turner, Portland, assets to Indiana. So yeah, I've floated this idea before. Boston needs additional playmaking. They've got too many guys that are isolation first scorers. And they need somebody to kind of grease the wheels, and I think Nerk would be that guy. And I mean, Steve can attest to this. When I throw in trade machine stuff, the three-way that I keep bringing up is between Boston, Indiana, and Portland. Mm-hmm. That seems to be the one that can benefit all three parties. I think CJ would be a really good fit in Boston. You're talking about Brogdon, CJ, LeVert, whoever they stick at the 4, and Sabonis. And I think that'd be a pretty damn good team. The idea behind that would be, I think if you're Portland, you're trying to get Miles Turner and TJ Warren. I think that's what you're trying to pry out of this. For everybody out there wondering what CJ McCollum's value is, because I've seen, and you had this in the poll, the whole idea of CJ McCollum having negative value. CJ McCollum does not have negative value. It's not great value, but it's not negative value. And Steve, you can attest to this. For what I have said, the current state of CJ McCollum's value is what?
Marcus Smart and a first-round pick.
There you go. So that is from multiple people that I have asked around the league. If you had to put a barometer of currently available assets, what would it look like? And it's Marcus Smart and a first-round pick. I mean, before everybody loses their mind, I'm not saying the Blazers would take Marcus Smart. I'm saying that's the level of player plus a first-round pick, which that's not a kick in the teeth. Marcus Smart is a very good functional player that has value across the league. I've asked folks in Sacramento what they would envision CJ going to Sacramento for. And the offers that I have heard are Bagley and Harrison Barnes. Right now, they are out on Bagley. They are done. And if you're going to take a flyer on a young dude, that's a pretty good flyer to take, especially if you've got somebody who can rein him in. Because he's talented. There's a reason he went where he got drafted. I mean, that's, and let's be honest, it's not a good place to go for a young guy if you're Sacramento. I saw a couple other ones in here. The Ingram stuff, the whole idea of signing. So I think the number the Blazers stop at when it comes to Norman Powell, Steve, I tend to come back. Corey says, is $24 million too much? I think that's the number you go to if the Knicks push, right? 24 is your breaking point?
I don't know. I think it's probably 26 for the Blazers. Who knows? We'll see how desperate they get.
That's the thing, is the overpay will be there. Mm-hmm. Like, they will overpay for Norman. And no, go ahead.
The price they would pay to give up Gary Trent Jr.'s bird rights to burn that asset,
it's pretty high.
It would be unreal, especially for a GM that is fighting to keep his job. I think Neil O'Shea is here for this year, but like the margin for errors, like he can bifurcate all he wants. He's not going to get out of this where it's at right now.
Well, here's the thing. He's going to get at least 2 more years. That's the thing, unless the team is sold between now and then. Because his contract is through 2024. And for everybody else wondering, well, are the Blazers going to make a move in the front office? Hell no, not right now, because they're going to eat. But I don't know what the buyout clause. I'm making a guess here. I'm assuming it's anywhere between $16 and $20 million. They are not going to eat that. Listen, you could be the richest person in the world. You are not eating $20 million for somebody to not work for you. Not in the front office. It's one thing if you're talking about a player because of the goodwill that could garner on the back end. So, but for a front office, barring a literal criminal offense, he's going to be around at least for 2 more years, unless against the team is sold. If Larry Ellison buys the team, one of the 3 richest guys on the planet, you could see a wholesale yeet. It's just everybody gone.
Yeah, or I mean, if the NBA really picks up on the expansion talk and they get that money right away.
Yes, exactly. If they get that money, which what did we figure out the number was going to be? About $200 billion for the Blazers.
Yeah, so it'd be $5 billion split 30 ways.
So $200 million, basically in the pocket of whoever owns the Blazers at that point in time. Which, good money if you can find it.
Yep, exactly.
Let's see. Folks, I know folks keep saying that Sacramento, or excuse me, that CJ's a negative contract. It's not a negative contract. It's still not. That's the thing, is that there is still positive value on it. As much as we hit on the whole fact that he's not that guy, that he's not nobody's a CJ McCollum away from being a contender. If you get him and slot him as your third guy, you're doing really well. Mm-hmm. If we're being honest, like if CJ McCollum is your third star, you're above average, right?
Yeah. Well, so when I say that, I should say that if you're a franchise that's looking just to make the postseason, that you haven't been there in a while.
If you're the Phoenix Suns 2 years ago,
you might be a CJ McCollum away from putting butts in seats.
Memphis Grizzlies,
postseason.
Like one of those, like, you can see it. But Orlando would kill to have playmaking and shot creation of CJ McCollum's status. Like that's, Jason Wells, CJ on Eastern Conference team, 25-5-5. I can legitimately see that. And I've said that about him. If he's your lead guard, I can see CJ doing that when his usage rate is where he is the top of the pecking order of the guards. I don't think that's out of this world, right, Steve?
No, I just think it's the thing with CJ and Dame here, and I mean, God, you wrote the book on it, is you just can't have 2 guys that you have to hide on defense at the same position group.
Yeah.
Which, if we want to dive into it right now, the Karl Anthony Towns thing, if there's any smoke to that fire, which I don't know if there is.
You kick that tire.
You kick the tire, but it's a totally different obstacle if you have a center that is CJ level bad on defense, and you're going to be trying to I think Dame can turn it on when the time's right. I think he's gotten a lot better as a defender as far as getting to his spots and not making the silly mistakes. But you're still going to have Dame and Cat on the floor, and I don't know where you go from there, and I don't know if that's a title-winning team. But as an asset, you got to go get Karl Anthony Towns if you can get it.
Let's hit the Cat stuff here, because Minnesota being a team that's about to be sold and everything that's kind of going on between that, there's let's be honest, that team being sold is gonna happen, and the chance and the likelihood of them being moved is very high, which creates a lot of instability in the franchise, which is also going to lead me to another point here with another franchise. If Cat's available, you get talent and you figure it out, because it's a lot easier to get pieces at 2, 3, and 4 to fill in between than it is to get the all-world, maybe most prolific shooting big man of all time. For everybody that wants to dog on the Timberwolves, and you should, because they're very bad, Cat's offensive numbers are out of this world. He flirts with 50, 40, 90 as a lead option. That's let's be honest, that's batshit crazy, right?
Like, yeah, it's insane. Like, what he can do on the offensive end would be, when we talk about, and
he'd be your number 2.
What Nerk can do when we talk about when he is playing at his best for the offense, Cat is that on steroids, and it would be like I don't know how a team would approach a Dame Cat pick and roll. Like it would be absolutely insanity.
I want to hit on that real quick. And I think this highlights the difference between Dame CJ or anybody else and Dame Cat. Mike Richmond made a really good point that I love when you're talking about your best players. Dame and CJ can't run an action that forces a defense to pick and choose between them offensively. Like the whole pick your poison. You can't run a 1-2 pick and roll. And you're just bringing another defender that's like size, like-minded, or maybe better in a pick and roll. You run a Dame Cat pick and roll, you are putting so much pressure on a defense to pick your poison when Dame turns a corner or Cat pops. The gravity involved and the size difference in the guys that you would put under pressure are so crazy that it doesn't matter what you do. On a night in, night out basis, you wouldn't have to be all that creative to put a defense under pressure, especially in the regular season. So, again, if you've got that ability, you go find it. And I'm going to grab a couple questions here. Mitchell Robinson. You and I have talked about Mitchell Robinson. Sure, if they moved on from Nerk, but here's the thing. After the way the Knicks played in the playoffs, I think they're more likely to retain him now than ever before.
Yeah.
Because he covers up for so many sins for their backcourt.
I just worry. The thing, my issue with Mitchell Robinson is
go on.
The Blazers just got off a clutch athlete in Gary Trent Jr.
They have one more right now in Yusuf Nurkic, who brought up clutch in their most recent press conference.
So that's I don't know if the Blazers want that type of headache, and plus you're going to be navigating a new contract for Mitchell Robinson right now, and I think that's probably a sticky situation that you could probably it's an avoidable mess. If
you can avoid clutch, it's a good thing to avoid as an organization because they're a pain in the ass to deal with.
Yep.
I think this is a really, really good theory question from Gabe Uris. Question for you. Would it be better for the Blazers to trade CJ and someone else for a guy like Middleton or Ingram, or trade him to a team for some young players like the Knicks? And I think that's a really good question because the Blazers as an organization typically try to go with option number 2. That has been their MO because they've got to keep things going. They are one step away, in my opinion, from not having any assets left. It's Simons, Little. That's it when you're talking about young guys, right?
Yep.
If you move CJ for and something else for an in-prime guy, you have to know that lean years are coming. And as ownership, you care about that. As a GM, you do not give a damn because you don't care about the guy that comes after you. Because if this screws up, it doesn't matter. You're gone. So if you're Neil Olshey, this is the time to go in on the bigger name if you can find it, right?
Yeah, I think the Blazers have always emphasized either getting draft assets or getting a guy on a controlled contract. And I mean, we saw that with Yusuf Nurkic with the first round picks in that trade. I wonder with potentially this team looking to change ownership side, yes, in theory, Neil Olshey probably not going to be the guy assembling teams when this thing goes belly up. But Jody Allen still might be trying to get off the team in that situation. And if they're have an empty cabinet of assets, that could be a disaster situation for the Vulcans and for Jody Allen.
And let's not forget, for those that aren't aware, Burt Cole is still pulling a lot of strings. Paul Allen's longtime friend, Vulcan in chief. He was in the building in Game 5, and he was in the building for Game 6. He saw what happened. And if you're looking for that line to PA, that's it. For the basketball guy that would kind of speak to PA, at least in that regard, but he was also a cold, calculated SOB when it came to decisions. So if you're looking for that, I think that's where you would look in that question. That's a great question, Gabe, as far as like the theory behind that, because that's really important. Like, which way do you go? It's very, very easy to say to go get the best player available. But the ramifications of that and what that does to the organization long term, when you're talking about the viability of selling it, that the billionaire is still going to buy the nice toy, but it drives down the price. when you're talking about it's going to be bare for a couple of years. Couple questions in here from Corey. Is CJ better than Zach LaVine or Terry Rozier? I think Rozier is probably the bar. Zach LaVine is better. He's younger. He's on a better contract, but it's going to be a more expensive contract going forward. It was kind of funny. You and I talked about this literally a year ago, trading CJ for Zach LaVine, and people laughed at me because I said that LaVine was going to end up being better. Well, guess what? He's better now. But go ahead and go back to the Twitter questions. Is there a feasible way to greatly improve with a contract situation? If not, shouldn't they maximize their most valuable asset before he leaves for nothing? And I think that's a part of Dame. We'll leave that part of it out of it. I think this part of it matters for the non-Dame CJ lot. Steve, how many free agents do the Blazers currently have on their roster? Because I think it's 9, right? I'm pulling it.
Well, you have the 2-year group, and then you have everybody who's going to go up this year. So it's, you have outside of Dame, CJ, Covington, Yusuf Nurkic, who's on a partial guarantee.
Let's go 21, 22.
And then you have Ant and Nasir, and the rest you can look at probably heading out the door.
So your active contracts, when you factor in player options going into next year, Dame, CJ, Cov, Nerk, Powell, Jones, Ant, Nas, Ellaby.
Woof.
And this is why I said last summer it was so important to have everything lined up, because you were not going to have the ability going forward. This is where the CJ deal comes and punches you right in the gut. It is a brutal, brutal realization. So that's why the discussion, at least, about should you look to get maybe some younger players to fill in those gaps underneath and take a flyer. And I saw somebody ask about DeAndre Hunter. He looked like he was not going to be all that great, and he hit hard this year. Like, he is looking like an absolute superstar for that team. Just two-way forced. Everything you want, has a primary creation, primary defender. Like, he looks like he's going to be a Jaylen Brown-esque kind of player. If you're the Blazers, if you can identify those guys, and they've done pretty good about identifying guys in the draft who have a skill set later on, the Pat Connaughtons, the Jake Laymans, the Gary Trent Juniors, like, they've done good with those guys. Like, saying, these are NBA players that we know there's value in. If they can do that among guys that are actively out there, I think that's huge. If you can find a trade. The problem is, we're talking about trading CJ McCollum. I found a lot of these guys over the years, and you can attest to this. The whole idea of going after Oladipo years ago, going after Donovan Mitchell in the draft, going after Sabonis before he really hit, like the Chris Middleton before he hit, looking at Jonathan Isaac in the draft, although the injuries are haunting him now. But I was able to identify guys before they hit, and the more I look at this now, Zach LaVine, the Jaylen Brown, whether or not they were invested in those guys. Basically, the whole idea is that you could identify those guys early enough that you could make that move and it would pay out in the long run. There was risk involved. There's no doubt about it. But at least for me, when I look at that list now, dude, do you see anybody out there that like is readily identifiable? Because I don't.
No, you're gonna be going into like the Maurice Harkless pile at this point if you're looking at stuff like that where guys might be on their way out. I think there are opportunities in certain places as far as like Orlando, Houston.
Christian Wood is the one. I think they would actually move off of him.
And I think there is some avenue for improvement, but as far as like targeting a marquee guy in a lopsided trade makes it really tough. And also too, when you're looking at CJ McCollum and you're looking at some potential guys that are going to be free agents this year, sign and trades are so
rare.
So hard to thread that needle, especially if and it's impossible to make them a lopsided trade where you're going to get multiple players in, where it's almost ideally in a perfect world, you're going to get CJ McCollum traded somewhere if you don't get equal value, or at least what the Blazers perceive that to be, you hope to get multiple players back, and that's impossible with a sign and trade. So
the flip side of that is, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, we're talking about organizations. The Miami Heat are quietly being sold because Arison lost billions in the cruise industry. And I think that's where the hesitancy to re-sign Jimmy Butler to a deal that's probably going to hurt quite a bit on the back end. That's, again, I think an area that Portland can target.
Yep.
Because that back end of Jimmy Butler's deal is not going to look good. It's going to be Westbrook-esque. It's going to be John Wall-esque, and you're going to go, ugh. But I think Jimmy's probably one of those guys that you're looking to pair with Dame, right? He's on that short list for you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think if you're looking for a no-nonsense guy to maximize his prime years, I think Jimmy Butler's on a very short list of players that you might be able to land. Another guy that we've seen brought up in the chat here a couple times is Paul George. If you want a chance at Paul George, you better be rooting hard for the Mavericks.
Listen, if they flame out, that's a real possibility. I've talked to a few people in LA, and they seem to believe that Kawhi wants to stay regardless. Like, it's home, and while it is home for PG, he's not number one on that list. Kawhi.
I'm not gonna out him, but I would say Ben Golliver has outlined a very good case of why Steve Ballmer will not be paying up to do this with Paul George. This is not what he signed up for, and if you haven't picked up Bubble Ball yet by Ben Golliver, you need to. If you look at that, and you look at how the Clippers are constructed and what Steve Ballmer bought that team for, the price tag he had and the investments he's made, it is not to be this team. And Paul George will become available. And they're not going to move Kawhi. Kawhi doesn't want to move. I mean, he's getting to use the helicopter. He's getting to live in San Diego. Like, he's not going anywhere.
No.
But Paul George, there is an avenue for him to become available. And I think regardless of all the bullshit that we've seen, I think Paul George is an ideal fit. I mean, could you imagine Dame, Norm, and Paul George in the same?
That is a monster backcourt.
And in Paul George and Norm, you got guys who can finally give you some of that defensive versatility that really lets Damian Lillard do what he wants to do on offense and not worry about having to really cover up for somebody on the defensive end.
I want to go back to the Blazers Edge comments because I haven't refreshed this in a while. I saw a couple in here that they don't expect the coaching situation to be settled anytime soon. I would staunchly disagree. That coaching situation is going to be nailed down very quickly, and by very quickly I mean in the next 2 weeks. The offseason is coming quick. Like, you need to have things in place because you need to understand, like, if Norm's going to be here. Like, that feedback has to be there. And again, we alluded to this a little bit earlier, the whole idea of what happens in public versus what happens in reality. The Blazers are working things behind the scenes. I think there's going to be a surprise hire. I think Chauncey is the most likely of the not surprise hires. I think you've got guys that you're going after that aren't there publicly, and then there are guys, again, pick up the breadcrumbs here that I'm dropping, guys.
Wait, so I have Miami Heat are for sale.
Pick up the breadcrumbs.
Yeah, I think the coaching situation is going to be ironed out pretty quickly for a couple reasons. One is they don't want any more competition than they have to.
Nope.
I think you want to get to this market early, strike it quick. I think Boston is probably the job a lot of people are watching the most. But if you're looking for, someone to come in with brass balls and really take this by the reins and take that risk and coach Damian Lillard, I think you're going to find that guy pretty quick. And really, Damian Lillard did an excellent job of selling the franchise and himself to any potential coach of, if you are anybody that has dreams of really making it in this league, you got to be chomping at the bit to coach a guy like Damian Lillard, who the team was so obviously flawed around him in Game 5, that you want to come in and you want to be the guy that was able to assist Damian Lillard to take the Trailblazers to another level, because that is legend building, opportunity for whoever that coach is.
This kind of ties into what you're saying. Any chance that they hire a rando G League coach and hope to get the next Nick Nurse? No. from what I have been told, excuse me, this is what the Blazers are prioritizing. Cachet, the ability to look Damian Lillard in the eye and not have to blink. And that doesn't come from the G League. Experience. And this is something I think that is maybe lost on some folks because we're a 90% white community. Diversity is something that they are actively trying to include in their hire. I have been told that is something they are looking to do. Which, yeah, if you look at what the organization has done behind the scenes, they have tried to include or expand their reach. And so they're trying to get more people of color. They're trying to get more women. They're trying to do those things actively. Like if you look about looking for a progressive organization, that's something they're trying to do. Which is why, again, I think there's a 0% chance that they hire Jason Kidd because of his background. So I don't think we're going to see out of the box in that regard. When I'm talking out of the box, I'm talking a bigger name. So I think this is a overarching theme question here, Steve. What makes you or anyone else believe the Blazers have the assets needed to acquire a true complement for Lillard, someone who would make them real contenders rather than just slightly better than average competitors? What's your answer to that?
Well, it's two things for me. One is I think Neil O'Shea finally has enough fire behind him that his backside is warm enough that he might be motivated to finally put one of the guys he drafted on the table in CJ McCollum in a trade. I think that time, if it's ever going to happen, it's going to happen this offseason. The other thing that gives me optimism is we typically see the going rates for these top level stars being, 3 first-round picks and control of 2 other picks. Since Portland is conveying the number 24 pick to the Rockets this year, they have the full ability to trade all their future picks. Also, you have the opportunity. Yes, the cupboard is not as full as it once was, but you still have Nasir Little and Anthony Simons on the roster as far as 2 controlled contracts that you can move.
You be careful.
So you have the pick package. You have the salary in CJ McCollum and Yusuf Nurkic and Robert Covington if need be. You have the younger players on controlled assets, and you have full control of all your first-round picks. We've seen stars go for less. We've seen We've seen Jimmy Butler go for this a couple times. We've seen Paul George go for this. We've seen Kawhi Leonard go for less and this.
DeMar DeRozan in the first. That's what Kawhi Leonard went for. When the leverage is not there, or there are extenuating circumstances that don't get a lot of public attention, that's what. And it sucks that the Blazers have to hope for this, but I think those situations do exist right now. I think there's a couple out there right now. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think
or the potential for a couple, I should say. Yeah,
exactly. I think depending on how the next few games go in the next few days, I think that list might double in size.
Yes.
But unfortunately, I don't think like Bradley Beal has always kind of been the guy I would love to have in Portland next to Dame.
Remember those discussions 3 years ago when people thought CJ was better than Beal? That was cute.
Ugh. I don't see Beal going anywhere now. Even though it wasn't a super successful showing, I think
it was still successful enough. They took some momentum off that,
and they got guys in place there that moving forward have some potential and could fit on his arc right now.
Yeah,
I think there are guys out there though. Long story short, and I think it's just time for the Blazers to really finally, put it all out there and go for it, because at this point, I don't think Neil O'Shea can really feel like he has a bunch of job security anyway. So he might as well go and make that risky move.
You mentioned Ant. I saw a question in here from Dime. How open do you really think is? I'm sorry, Ogun Guitarist. What's Ant's trade value look like? I'm assuming slight sweetener level value. It's higher than that. I can tell you. I can tell you with absolute certainty that Ant has very good trade value around the league. There are people who think that he can be a legit 20-point a game scorer. So. The one thing you have to remember is he is in June. Now that I think about it, I think his birthday is in a couple days. He will turn 22. He will be the same age that Damian Lillard was when he came into the league. So he's rounding into form. I think a lot of folks were a little bit down on Ant, and I wanted to smash you all like ants, because obviously Ant is my guy, but his ability to work on the catch and shoot, his ability to work off the dribble as a 3-point shooter is top 10 in the NBA. Like that.
And isn't Ant is got to be near the top of the list of a player you want to see under a new coach with a new set of eyes,
running him off picks and like being a legit sixth man Rip Hamilton type
and
guy.
I'm not trying to rip Terry Stotts here, but like as far as when you're jotting down players, I'm excited to see this under a new coach.
Yes, I think he's probably top of that list.
He's top of the list, I think, for me.
Yeah.
Also, I do think he really you have better sources than I do, but like the vibe I've always gotten is there's a reason why he wasn't included in a lot of trades, and I think he is going to benefit so much if Carmelo Anthony maybe goes somewhere else this next offseason.
That shot diet goes to Ant.
And it's just how Ant gets into rhythm is going to be totally different when those shots are going to Carmelo Anthony, which I want to be very clear, Carmelo Anthony had some great moments this season.
He played better down the stretch than I ever anticipated him playing.
Yeah. But I think Ant is one of those guys where I don't think we've really seen what he can be, and I think he's someone who can truly be unlocked with a regime change.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And here's the thing. I can say with near certainty that he was not included in the Aaron Gordon trade for what was reported out there. He was not included. So they do, when you're talking about assets, they value him very, very highly within the organization. Excuse me. I gotta stop drinking carbonated drinks, but let me tell you, sparkling ice, delicious.
Bingo.
On a slightly weird thing, my wife hates the fact that when I drink, I crush the bottle, and I did it out of a habit, and here's what's really disgusting. I chewed for so long that I used to mark my bottle by squeezing the bottle, and now I do it like every time. There you go. There's a little peek behind.
Yeah, buddy. I grew
here.
up in Eastern Oregon. I've been around the spit container too, my friend.
Oof. That's a terrible, terrible situation.
You know, I've been there. We've all been there. We're a little hungover. We reached for the wrong bottle, and your day just got infinitely worse. I've been there.
This from Blazer fan, and I think if the Blazers, if it made sense, and here's the thing, Dame flexed his muscle in this whole Jason Kidd thing, and I hate it. If he wants to flex his damn muscle, flex it in the free agent market and the trade market.
Or not after the fact. Like, I don't care that you fostered a relationship with Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah.
Like, do it when he's a free agent, then I care.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. But sign and trade for DeRozan. How about a just straight sign? Like, if you could get DeRozan to come to Portland on a good deal, on like a legit MLE deal, he'll get more than that. But if you had that relationship, now would be the time to do it. Because I know people are down on DeRozan. He was one of the best point forwards in the NBA this year. He took his game to another level as a distributor. And that's something Portland, if they're not going to have CJ, they will need additional creation. And that is probably the most volatile asset collection in the entire NBA right now.
And if you want to talk about paving the way for making a compelling case for Norm Powell to re-up,
bringing on one of his absolute best friends in the entire world would be huge. Norman and DDR are tight. Not like, oh, we played on the same team. They are best of friends. That would absolutely matter.
You have a UCLA guy. Yes, DeRozan went to your alma mater, but an LA guy.
But again, LA guys. That does matter. When we talk about Dame and the Oakland guys, those SoCal guys, there's a reason James Harden wanted Russell Westbrook besides the fact that they play together in OKC. They're both LA guys. Like those, Kawhi and PG are LA guys. Like those ties around the league, they go to the same runs. They go to the Drew League together. They go to the same open gym at UCLA. Like those guys they're together all the time. And so it would matter, and he would be a fantastic fit. I think if you do that, you definitely got to get a little bit more defensive on the back line. It has to be Nerk or a Miles Turner type to cover up for that. But I think your playmaking, your creation between Dame, Norm, DDR, you have three guys that want to get downhill hard. That would be a very difficult lineup to deal with on a night-in, night-out basis. Did his defense improve? Again, that's why I'm saying you need to. But here's the difference between Dame, Norm, DDR, you've got 6'1", 6'4", 6'7". And you've got a guy who's a two-way as opposed to going 6'1", 6'2", 6'4", was what they're doing now. You match up significantly better in that regard. What do you think about a CJ for Tobias trade? Shout out Adrian Bernasich. I saw his question up in there. We've hammered out on the trade machine for years together. I like Toby, but not at that price, right? Are you on board with Toby at a max deal? Because that one's a tough pill.
I think Tobias Harris has exceeded CJ's trade value in this season. I think the questions were always about what Tobias Harris could do on the defensive end. I think this season he put it all together. I think in a different circumstance on a different contract, he is in the running for most improved player this year. He had a great year with the Sixers. Doc gets that guy to play to his full level of potential. And Tobias has always been the guy who's been in the trade machine for me for CJ, where it's just for so long it was exchanging headaches for me. As far as, a talented
both
but flawed
mid-range
player.
guys with flaws.
Yep. A talented but flawed player for a talented but flawed player. Let's exchange headaches here. I think Tobias is above that now. And I think if the Sixers are really going to lean into Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid together, I think
CJ
Tobias
makes more sense, right?
CJ makes sense, but Tobias also makes a lot of sense for that team too, as far as where do you want CJ operating? You want him operating, side to side in that mid range when you don't really know what to do with Ben Simmons and you're infringing on Joel Embiid's space, or would you rather have Tobias Harris in the corner or above the arc and doing a lot of different things as far as defensively and getting downhill and controlling the ball? And I just think Tobias Harris probably has more value for the Sixers right now.
Interesting, because I see it the other way, because in my world, Ben's a 4. And I also have Toby as a 4. They're best optimized as 4s. And that's the thing is if Portland made a move for Toby, they should probably look to move Cove. Because I look at Toby and I go, that's a modern day 4. And he is one of the best mid-range players in the NBA that gets overlooked a ton. So you would still have that additional shot creation, and you would have some mismatches that you could deal with on the back end. That contract hurts because CJ's deal sucks. Toby's is a legit max. That's the flip side. That's a different calculus. Like, that's one of those situations where you're like, if this goes sideways, you're in trouble, because that's not a deal you're getting off of unless.
Hey man, if the cap keeps going down, Dame and Toby's contracts are coming down.
That's true. They're tied to their percentage maxes, so they're tied to them. Let's see. Do you think we have the money for DDR? No, I don't think the TPMLE is going to count. And this is where screwing up the Derek Jones deal and giving him the full MLE bites you, because you lose access to the full MLE the next year. They can go to the taxpayer mid-level, which I haven't done the math on it because we haven't got the close of the books yet this year, but I think it's going to be about 9.1. Does that sound right, Steve?
Yep.
So I don't think that's enough. I think if DDR takes a discount, he's probably looking in the 15 range, 12 to 15. I think if you're looking for a discount rate, so I don't think they have the money necessarily to get him. I think it's ultimately the level, the place that they live is less than that guy, unless you have an existing relationship. I don't know, with a Norman Powell, with Damian Lillard, one of those types of deals. Let's see. I saw a couple in here. Will Melo return? What do you think?
I don't know. It's so hard to read that situation for me. I don't see it. I think his comeback story and moving up to number 10 on the all-time scoring list has been a great story, but I think this Blazers, the next iteration of this team, will be beyond just nice stories. I think the time to win is now, and I think if Melo wants to take even a more reduced role, I could see it maybe.
He's got to be human victory cigar status.
Yeah.
Legitimately. If the Melo stuff was because they weren't sure about Ant yet. They weren't sure about their stability. They weren't sure about Zach, which I think is a good way to get into this, because I've got a question here. Will Ennis be the second big? This is from Rob Willie at the Real R Dub. Will Ennis be the second big, or will the Blazers roll with Collins? I think it depends on if Olshey is still calling the shots. That last part, I don't think matters a ton. My spiel on Zach Collins is this. I'm glad he didn't come out and try and play in the playoffs. He needs to spend this entire summer getting healthy. Nothing like the shoulder good, ankle good, get right. Mm-hmm. The Blazers have his bird rights. He's going to be an RFA. If I'm the Blazers, I offer a 2-year deal worth $12 million. With the front deal is worth $5 million, the back deal is $7 million. The second number is a team option. Every bit of control is going to go to the Blazers. He has so much to prove that he hasn't played basketball in 2 years, Steve. Mm-hmm. Like it's not quite Greg Oden-esque, but it's flirting with that territory when you're out that long.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think especially for big men, typically the window that he has missed is usually that time where these guys kind of find their solid footing.
Yeah.
And you've just paused all of that. So I don't know. I have zero expectation, and don't take that the wrong way. I would be thrilled if he contributes in a meaningful way to this team, or if even he comes back and supplies depth. As far as Enes Kanter goes, I think he's a fine regular season backup center.
Yep.
And if they can get him to come back for that role, I'm all for it.
If they can get him vet minimum, and if he's like really legitimately wants to stay here, sign him up. Being able to roll that depth out there, great.
The Blazers need to have a contingency option for the postseason to
that's
put
where Zach
out
comes
there.
In.
And that's what Zach is. That's what, you roll the dice on a guy like Harry Giles who didn't work out this year, but you go out and you find a guy like that who has some size that can come in. I mean, these are the Alex Lenz of the world, the Daniel Gaffords who's had a great season.
Gafford may have made more percentage money in 2 months than anybody else in the league. It's between him and Austin Rivers.
Yep.
Just guys who just weren't doing anything, who were just crushing it. Nibble, does Blazers have a Discord? No, we don't. This is actually hosted on my YouTube site right now. I don't know what our plans are. I have mine, which I will start using more of during the offseason, doing the TV show and doing the podcast and everything else. Pretty much made live streaming near impossible. This offseason, we're going to do at least one a week, maybe more as news breaks. So I think we'll probably start leaning that way, or at least I will. And it will kind of serve as the de facto one for the channel. I think coach really matters if Melo stays or not.
I don't think they're making a coaching decision with Melo in mind.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is not only that. I saw another one here. I think Cove at small forward isn't great. Not at his age. Yeah, no, Cove's a power forward. When they traded for Cove, I had a few people say, "Oh, they'll start him at the 3. They'll start him at the 3." No, he's firmly a 4 at this stage.
If D'Antoni shows up, he's a 5.
Exactly. Well, we saw how that worked out against Jokic, which, to be fair, that's kind of how that goes.
Another round deeper in the playoffs, though. Or no, wait. Yeah. Right? No. I can't remember.
Yeah, no. It's let's see. I have so many questions here, and I think we've hit so many. I think this is a good one to touch on because we haven't really touched on it. We've kind of not necessarily danced around it, but kind of alluded to it. Do you expect Damian Lillard to demand a trade? And that's a broad question. I think you can put your own framing around it.
I think it could happen. I think that there are things that have happened that have laid the groundwork in a way that I didn't expect to see. And that comes from the Chris Haynes article a few months ago or a few weeks ago. That, yes, he says he didn't have any input on it, but those are clearly drawn from conversations that those two individuals
I'll tell you unequivocally, Damian Lillard had input on it.
Exactly. Chris Haynes isn't going to burn that Goodwin bridge on something like that. So I think that's part of it. I also think I'm very interested to see what Melo's influence is on Damian Lillard here, because if there is one superstar player that learned the lesson of damage your trade value before you ask for a trade, it is Carmelo Anthony. Because Carmelo Anthony, the big reason why he really struggled with the Knicks is the Knicks
give up everything.
As close as a fair offer is for a superstar player, the Knicks got that package from Denver. So, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So
yeah, young Gallo, young Wilson Chandler, and picks was a hell of an offer at that point.
And then the Knicks were just left with no other ways to build around it. Yeah. So I would hope that we'll never see the public trade demand. I hope if it does happen, I hope it doesn't happen, to be very clear. But if it does happen, I hope it is under wraps. I hope Damian Lillard would do the franchise and the organization a solid that he doesn't have to do. But I would hope that it would be kept kind of under wraps, keep out of the headlines, which there is some incentive for Lillard as far as his brand goes to keep it out of the headlines. But if it does happen, I hope it's one of those things that happens pretty suddenly and he's gone. Very similar to Kawhi's first trade, which there was some smoke there, but it moved quickly once it happened. It wasn't like Anthony Davis with the Pelicans. I mean, it was pretty rip the Band-Aid off.
So is there a chance that Damian Lillard requests a trade at some point in time? Unequivocally, yes. And this isn't to scare anybody, but those seeds have already been planted. The Chris Haynes article was the first shot across the bow. Changes need to be made. The Jason Kidd thing, that's another shot across the bow, because these are all exits that he's in his staff, his team, his agency, his PR group. They're forming this stuff. And for those of you who don't think that actively happens, it absolutely does. They are planning 1, 2, 3, 5 years in advance. That's how these guys work. Because you have to. Because GMs are planning the exact same way. Mm-hmm. And so he's going to, if things go sideways, he's going to say, I asked for this. You didn't give me this. I said do this. You didn't do this. You were supposed to surround me with X. You gave me Y. And so he's planting those things there as a just in case. This is like putting the claymore behind you. Like, it's just in case. We don't have to worry about it. But if we hear this thing go off, there's something coming up behind us. And I think that's kind of the situation. And here's where I disagree with you. I don't think that there's a chance in hell that the Trailblazers trade him without going public because of what he means to this franchise. Because if he doesn't go public with it, it is a nuclear option for whoever is in charge at that point in time. They will forever be the guy that traded Damian Lillard. And I don't think you can quite do it in that regard. Not in this market. And
I just think from an asset collection standpoint, I don't know if I see what you're saying, and that is compelling, but like, hopefully you have the team in place to explain it and frame it as, look, if we go public with this, his trade value instantly decreases. So I don't know.
No, again, I think it's a dicey situation. Speaking of dicey situations, we haven't really talked about this much. We alluded to it there with the Rich Paul stuff. This from Jeray Bryant. I saw it in here. I didn't want to skip over you. How likely is it that Nerk stays? His last interview casted doubt on his future as a Blazer, but Jason Quick said he is still a priority for the franchise to keep. Shout out Mike Richmond again for asking the question of the press conference by bluntly asking Nerk, do you want to be here next season? And shout out Yusuf Nurkic for turning his filter switch off. Nerk in press conferences is great because he will pretend for 20 seconds to do the PR shtick that they're all taught, and then his freaking Bosnian beast brain kicks over, and he's like, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to tell you what I really think. And he flat out, you do not go into that press conference saying clutch, saying Rich Paul as some sort of just off-the-cuff thing. That was a not-so-veiled threat.
Yep.
That's what that was. For anybody out there who wonders my opinion, because that's what you're here for right now, well, mine and Steve's, on Yusuf Nurkic. I love him. He drives me crazy. He's the second most valuable player on this team. He is infinitely more important than CJ McCollum. Not necessarily better, but infinitely more important because of his skill sets as a playmaker, as a rim protector, as one of the best screen and roll partners in the entire NBA. Those things elevate Damian Lillard to a place that nobody else on this team can do that. Him wanting a bigger role after fouling out of 3 games is, boy, that's a doozy. Just putting it on the table, real heavy like. That takes some balls to do that. Shout out to him, because I couldn't go in there after doing that, fouling out of 3 playoff games. But I think there are better ways to get him involved. I think that he should be higher up in the pecking order because guess what? Let me ask you this, Steve, instead of a guess what. When does the Blazers offense look the absolute best?
When Yusuf Nurkic is involved and healthy and on the floor.
He is the only player on this team where his first 3 settings are pass. And so it lubricates the offense. It keeps the ball popping from side to side. The defense can't load. If he catches in the middle of the floor and he's locked in, it puts a defense in a position of making decisions on multiple levels, not just A, B, or C. It's a decision tree. If A, then B, then C, then D, or it branches off. And that's the difference between running the offense through Nerk as a secondary option or CJ. Because the option when CJ gets it is dribble, dribble, shoot, dribble, 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 shoot, dribble, 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 into traffic, draw, and kick. He is not a natural playmaker, particularly in over the last couple of years. He has shown the propensity and the capacity to do so, but that is not his first couple of options. Will he be back? I think yes is the most likely scenario, but I will say that the Blazers at this past trade deadline did look to shop him. So, are they married to Yusuf Nurkic? No, they're not. Would they like to keep him? Would they like him to be a valuable part of this team going forward? Yes, they would. But they have demonstrated behind the scenes that the only untouchable is Damian Lillard.
A couple things going back to the press conference. Him saying he wanted to be involved from the very start of the season at a higher level doesn't pass the smell test.
Especially when you come into camp 30 pounds overweight.
Yeah, I know Nerk was going through some stuff personally, but you don't come into camp like that and then just rewrite history and say, "Oh, I was ready for a bigger role." Like, no, you weren't. You clearly were not. I think as far as trades that could happen, I think Yusuf Nurkic is at the top of my list just because what his
value is high.
His value and the flexibility his contract offers.
It's one of the best deals at that 12 to 15 million range that every team wants.
And you can see a team approach it like a much more valuable version of Trevor Ariza, where that money is not all guaranteed before July 28th. Mm-hmm. So he's a prime candidate to hit that Blazer button of couple days before the draft. We're going to make a few moves, and Yusuf Nurkic I think could be right there at the top of the list. And if you're looking to replace a player at a discount, I think you can do that with the center position in this league.
Yeah, I think those are the things that. So when I look up and down at available centers, so I started my list as the light from my spreadsheet. Yes, and there's a spreadsheet that's actively going. Players that I have loosely heard the Blazers associated with, as far as bigs go, Miles Turner, John Collins, Christian Wood, Marvin Bagley. Those are names that I've heard inquiries have been made. I could see Yusuf Nurkic being moved in that situation. I could see the Blazers looking around the league and going, if we're looking at wings, TJ Warren, Jeremy Grant, Tobias Harris, Harrison Barnes, again, Paul George. Like, CJ and Nerk being included for a Paul George deal, sure. Yeah, I could see something along those lines. It wouldn't, blow me away if I saw that. But here's the issue. How many replacement level bigs are there out there right now, Steve?
Hey, man, I already got Cody Zeller down on my free agent list, baby. You want to go to a dark place? Look at that list. No,
listen,
anyway, no.
Good regular season big, but as we saw in the postseason or in the elimination game, what are the Hornets missing right now?
Yep, they're missing a presence there.
So, and the Hornets I have on the list for if Gordon Hayward has, let's be honest, there was some weird stuff with the way that season ended, and Gordon Hayward is a perfect fit for what Portland needs. Tertiary option, premier playmaker, good size, can create for himself and play within a team concept. Mm-hmm. That deal's a little pricey, but so is CJ McCollum's. So if you're looking at ways you could justify some things, I know that they want to move off Devontae Graham. There's a realistic possibility they could try to move off Rozier. So I don't know if CJ makes a ton of sense there, but if you're looking at potential three-way deals, I think Charlotte's another place to look at.
Yeah, I think just from what they need down low and what they could offer and how LaMelo and Nerk could feed off each other would be, I think, be special on the offensive end as far as those guys.
The primary playmaking between those guys would be otherworldly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to be honest, I think that could be the potential to be special, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I did see one in here I wanted to address. Where did it go? Jancy Ardovas, is there any young Blazers we shouldn't trade? I don't think it's necessarily the right question to ask. Is there any young Blazers we shouldn't trade? Yeah, I'd put Ant on that list generally. But if you're looking at the whole situation of who is involved, I think that changes the calculus. Like, should they not trade Anthony Simons for Cat? Yeah, no. Like, that, I think that's the difference, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think we touched on it earlier. I think Damian Lillard is the only untouchable player on this roster, and I mean, you don't want to sell low on somebody, but you got to listen to every offer this offseason. I mean, whatever it takes to build the best team around Damian Lillard is what you need
for the immediacy.
To do. Yep, exactly.
So, this is kind of a fun question. This kind of gets us off the same stuff that we've been talking about a ton. Ask this question on Twitter. This is from Tony Peters, trying to fantasize differently right now, which I think this is kind of a fun exercise. Which NBA players from any era would fit next to Dame? For example, Lamar Odom, Scottie Pippen. Who's your kind of like dream scenario without going like, well, LeBron, Pippen, or LeBron, MJ, Larry Bird? You know what I mean? Like, what's kind of like your next tier down group?
Rasheed Wallace has always kind of been my go-to in that department.
A guy who willingly wants to be the number 2 or number 3.
Well, I mean, just really, I mean, a name we've already talked about. We watched what Rasheed could do next to Chauncey Billups. I think the matchup and the DNA that those two players have, I think it would be a perfect pairing. There's got to be more names out there that I'm just kind of blanking on. I'm thinking of like 2 guards that were really good two-way players that type of archetype that could really take the pressure off Dame in those backcourt situations to always guarantee that Dame is in a favorable matchup in the backcourt. But yeah, it's hard for me. I have Rasheed brain when it comes to this question. I'm interested to see if you have any different thoughts on that.
No, I mean, he's on that list for me, and the chance of it happening, like that it exists, Damon Brandon, I think, would have been one of the most unbelievable backcourts we've seen in NBA history. Basically swapping out Dame and Steph, I think if you put Clay alongside Dame, I think Clay would have been actualized the exact same way. There's definitely some guys out there, small forward types, like seeing Dame play alongside somebody who's stupidly explosive, like a T-Mac. Like T-Mac for me would be one of those ones where you're just like, you have to deal with the precision and the explosive shooting of Damian Lillard, but he's never had somebody play alongside him who just opened you up with their ability to just blow you away athletically. Like Derrick Jones Jr. is the closest thing that he is maybe Nick Batum.
Yeah.
Probably the best, like, who athletically were just like, that's crazy, right? Like I think that would be the archetype that I would look for outside of like other Blazers. Multi-skill set guys. I think Kirilenko would be a guy I would have loved to have seen play in Portland. Like Pete Kirilenko would have been a nightmare alongside Damian. Like his skill set would have just been, in today's NBA, that size, length, switchability, mobility, like that would have been bonkers.
I don't know. I don't know if there's a league rule that you can't put a Russian player that close to the Port of Portland. So I don't know if that would happen. So we need to temper those expectations. So just I think that's in the bylaws.
It's true. Dimitri here. Norm is very athletic. He's explosive, particularly for his size. He is not a blow you out of the gym athlete like T-Mac. T-Mac is a crazy 1%er. Like 6'8" from the free throw line with authority. Like he's in a honestly, Ant might be the most explosive guy, but just hasn't translated to the court as far as like crazy athleticism on this team currently.
Oh. Jere Bryant brought up Cliff Robinson too, and I think that's an excellent choice.
Yes. Again, so. I think those tweener 3-4, 4-5 types that cover up a lot of sins on both sides of the floor, Kirilenko, Cliff, Rashid, like those hybrid-y guys, I think those are guys that, like, honestly, I would like to see him with the last version of Draymond Green, and I think this is going to surprise some folks, Boris Diaw. Mr. French Press himself. Like, I don't think people truly understand how great Boris Diaw was. Like, if he played in today's NBA, you would look at him in a way that would just blow your mind. He was a passing savant. It looked like he didn't give a damn because he saw the game 8 steps faster than literally everybody else. That's why he looked the way he did, because he didn't have to be in world-class shape because he knew what you were going to do long before you ever did. So he would get to spots and create mismatches 10 seconds in advance.
I was lucky enough to live in Arizona during kind of those peak sun years. And Boris Diaw, Leandro Barbosa, and Raja Bell are like 3 of like my favorite non-Blazers ever. And Diaw, like you said, he had a little bit of that Brandon Roy in him where it never looked like he was working too hard, but he always got to where he needed to go. He always got the ball where it needed to go, and just that real smooth operator. I think the closest thing we kind of have to that now in the NBA, Kyle Anderson's kind of cut from the same cloth when it comes to that, as far as guys who can pinpoint passes and don't look like they're exerting a ton of energy. But yeah, Diaw's a fun one to think about.
It's just like the random names in there that I like to see kind of come out in that regard. It's like, all right, I can definitely get that. I saw a couple other questions in here. Is Draymond to the Blazers realistic? Do you think that there's any, like, do you like the fit? Do you like anything along those lines? Like, what about that is like, I can figure that out.
I just try to think of it from the Warriors' perspective, and I don't know what trade makes sense to get that deal done. I don't know what CJ McCollum does on that roster unless you're ready to move Clay full-time to small forward, which that might be knocking on the door before too long after, the series of injuries. I don't know. I think Draymond would be fun even now. I think just from an attitude standpoint,
it'd be a big time shift.
Yeah, it'd be a huge shift. But Warriors are on my list of a team that gets interesting if Dame clearly wants out. I think the Warriors are right on the top of my list as far as a team that could put together a very interesting trade package, especially with the Wolves pick, with Wiggins, with Wiseman, some future assets, what they can throw together to kind of make the salaries work, and as far as what young assets look like going forward, and motivation for both teams. I just don't see a deal that gets done, and I think Golden State at least is going to try
to run this back one more time.
To run it back to see if it's still there, see if they can recapture some of that magic, because it would be an all-time NBA great story if they do, catch lightning in a bottle again.
Speaking of all-time NBA great, Dimitri has Juan Dixon is my second favorite NBA player ever, and I don't know why. Listen, dude, you came to the right place because that Maryland Terrapin team, Steve Blake and Juan Dixon, is one of my favorite college basketball teams of all time, and I actually still have a Terrapins NCAA title T-shirt from that year that is way too small for me now, but that was one of the most stupidly fun teams I've ever watched play basketball. Are you a Juan Dixon truther?
Oh yeah, I was, like you said, I was all about that Terrapins team, and I was stoked.
You Chris Wilcox on that team too. There's one other NBA guy I think that was on that team. I'm struggling to forget who it was, but that team was loaded.
Yeah,
absolutely loaded,
and just played a super fun brand of basketball in a time where there was a lot of guys in that ACC that were playing crazy. Or were they Big East then? God, I can't remember. Anyway, super fun.
Been, but I
and conferences mean nothing to me now. But when the Blazers ended up with both Steve Blake and Juan Dixon, it was awesome because I remember watching those guys, and I think I rode Maryland chalk all the way in a couple brackets when I was in high school. So it was nice to see.
This one's a kind of a good question, I think, and it kind of we'll start winding down here because we've been going for almost 2 hours, and I know Steve's got kids to deal with.
Yep.
Jancy Rodolphus again. In hindsight, do you still do the Gary Trent for Norm trade considering the first round exit? I know this one's going to test you.
Yeah, I've gone full circle on this question. I think, as always with the Norm trade, I think the next 6-8 weeks are going to be crucial for that trade in my mind, as far as what they're able to do with Norm, if they're, hopefully are able to keep Norm, or if they trade Norm for an asset. But if they just outright he walks for nothing, that trade's a disaster. Looking back, even with the first round exit, I think it still is the right move to make. I think Norm offered a lot more to what that team did. I don't think that early May winning streak, late season winning streak happens without Norm Powell. I think because of what Norm was able to do, Dame was able to catch his wind kind of going into that final stretch. So I think it's an absolute, you do that trade over again, and you just really hope that you're able to lock him up this offseason.
Here's the flip side of it, or I guess I should say flip side, the additional part of this. Gary was not going to be happy re-signing here behind the lineup problems, so to speak. He wasn't going to be happy playing a small forward. Like that's he wanted a guaranteed path to minutes, to 30 a night, and I don't necessarily think the Blazers believe that he is that guy. He's a two guard in my mind who can play some three at times. So there's some issues there as you go back and forth trying to figure out what Gary's role was going to be going forward. And I've seen a couple other people say here, I'd rather pay Norm than Gary. I think that's the situation. Like, would you rather play Gary 18 to 20, or would you rather pay Norm 19 to 22, 23? And I think Norm offers you a skill set, even though he's older than Gary, that is immediately recognizable. I think that's a we saw it, even though he could not hit a corner three to save his life in the playoffs, which, God, that was frustrating. You saw him at times be a spark plug that the Blazers needed on multiple levels, whether it was getting downhill, whether it was creating a defensive turnover, taking on bigger tasks. Like, he was pretty damn good on guys that are a lot bigger than him, and that is a viability that you just don't get in Gary. Like, he doesn't have the wingspan, and he doesn't have the requisite size. Even though he's taller than Norm, I think Norm played a lot bigger than Gary could play. And so you're getting a lot more out of him. And I think we'll kind of wrap things up here as far as the Norm and CJ stuff. If CJ is gone, will Norm resign? The presumptive thought process is they are trying to move CJ McCollum and re-sign Norm. The order of operations to this is where it gets dicey, because legally, via the CBA, the Blazers can't discuss this with Norman Powell right now, as he is a UFA with bird rights. The scary thing is, it's one of those things that it gets a little bit dicey because the NBA has been a little bit tighter as we talk about the tampering stuff. So the Blazers have to walk a fine line here.
Well, I wonder with the status of Norm, where technically he's under contract until he opts out. I wonder if that affords them some wiggle room as far as the type of discussions they can have, because at that point you're typically talking about an extension in any way you would talk to a player about extension. But if you think this isn't happening, it's no surprise that Rodney Hood had a deal on the table, the second he opts
Weird.
out.
That's so crazy how that happened, right?
Yeah.
Just immediately just agreed to, huh? It's almost like that kind of thing kind of just happens very carefully. I think that the Norm is priority number one outside of the Dame and the coaching stuff is getting him signed, because that's the domino that kind of falls in line afterwards. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out in the long run. Because the Blazers aren't that number one, they didn't have a great end of the season. They didn't utilize Norm as well as they should have. I think Stotts leaned on Dame and CJ even more. I tend to believe that Olshey forced the trade both as a part of not believing entirely in Gary Trent Jr. being ready to be that guy that they needed to be, but also to take Gary and Rodney out of Stotts' hands, because he was relying on them so much, particularly Rodney, who ended up performing to a level that was one of the worst in the NBA. I mean, you look at his production stats by the end of the season, and it was bad, and Stotts relied on him. I mean, playing him at all really at any point in time was almost inexcusable, but he started leaning on him because of as a crutch, and that was really the beginning of Terry's downfall this season, to be honest, was his reliance on Melo and Rodney, and then more so with Cantor and Melo as the season progressed. And you could see the writing on the wall develop early on. But the Norm deal CJ trade, I think it's important to deal CJ at the draft. That's when there's still more potential out there. Picks haven't been made yet, and so there's more opportunities. But if you deal him then, you have to remember, now you have no choice but to sign Norman Powell. And if some team comes in and offers a dumb number, you're in a rough position if you don't have a ready-made replacement. And that's the risk of trading Gary Trent Jr. is that you could match no matter what. Here you have Norm's bird rights, but you don't have the RFA status. That's what you gave away. And I know that's the thing that you're most scared of, is not having the bird rights with Gary.
Yeah, I think anytime you're in this market, and especially when you're dealing with a player that has never been a free agent before, typically we see these guys kind of explore their options on the market. And it's not that they might have the intention of going and signing somewhere else, but Norm, a second-round guy, earned his way into the league. He's earned the right to get wined and dined.
And they have. For anybody who doesn't know, the Norm has been wined and dined by Portland. That part of it they have done very well about.
Yeah, but I mean, he still deserves to be courted by other teams if he chooses
go into
to do
open
so.
Free agency. Yes,
yep, exactly.
As an NBA player, you want that experience at least once.
Yep.
LaMarcus was very, very, very adamant about that when he went to free agency. Was that the whole idea of going to free agency, being wined and dined, the idea that I'm going to go and feel loved. I think that's the way you go about it when you're looking at those guys. I saw one in here from Alvaro that I wanted to answer, and then I think we'll tie it up with this, and that'll put us at 2 hours. Don't you think it was more of an issue with coaching front office? Trent saying he didn't feel appreciated by the franchise, and Nerk being super frustrated in the same way also seems like a pattern. I think there's some truth to that, but I think the coaching front office stuff is about role usage and what they believed he was going to be right now, and as it related to Damian Lillard in particular. I think they believe this is a good connection between Dame and Norm. I think they see that as being viable and working. I think Nerk is a guy who is an emotional guy, and I think this is the same thing. The way Dame reacted, basically post game with the Nipsey Hussle quote and all that kind of stuff. Guys within 24 hours of having an upsetting loss, the way they're the end of their season, I think that's definitely a way that you look at things and go, you can probably dismiss some of that stuff. Same thing with Nerk, even though wasn't a great look, I think, in that exact matchup. But when you're looking at Norm, I think overall he's a better player. He's only going to cost you a little bit more. He fits next to Damian Lillard better. I wish Gary the best, and I've said since they drafted Gary flat out, and we had him at Hoop Summit. If he figures out the defensive side of the ball, he's going to be in the league for 10 years. He's going to be a good player. But is he going to be the guy that they need to have matched up with Damian Lillard long term?
Yeah.
So, all right, we're going to wrap it up there. Thanks for everybody. Again, 2 hours. We'll probably do at least an hour kind of going forward in the offseason. I'll do these more often throughout the offseason or anytime we get some big news breaking. This one was literally spun up last night because of everything that was happening. I was looking at doing this a little bit later in the week because I was expecting we'd have some more stuff along the line, but the Blazers kind of sped that up a little bit. But we'll bring things back. Thank you, everybody. For participating, getting the questions in. I'll try to plan these out a little bit better, which I know will make Steve and Dave a lot happier so they can plan content-wise.
No, I like to jump in and you say, hey, publish this.
Yeah, literally publishing live and making sure the technology works would be a huge part of everything going forward. Again, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Please keep sending questions in on Twitter. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. I'm checking that stuff throughout the day, and I'll start wrapping those up and kind of bundling them up. Like, rate, review, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff so I can keep growing the channel. You'll get more content here. I'll have more breakdown videos that I did towards the end of the season, particularly focusing on the free agents, the acquisitions, and the guys they'll be looking at once we get a little bit more of that. And again, thank you all very much. We'll catch you all next time. Steve, say goodbye.
Hey, if you enjoyed hearing my voice here, follow my podcast at Church of Roy Pod. It's a new show that we have. We're recording tomorrow, so please follow us. Just look us up. We had a lot of fun early going, so please, if you've enjoyed tolerating my voice for this, this is just over him. This I learned how to be a host, but I'm trying to talk less than I'm kidding. No, no, check it out. Follow me on Twitter at Steve D Hoops. I appreciate everybody getting questions in here. It's awesome to interact with all you guys.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I do have an announcement coming here very soon. Steve knows about it, so he can back it up. Won't mean a ton of changes for you guys, but it will be a different way that you consume some of the stuff that I have. I'm really excited to share with you here in the next probably couple weeks, and we'll come back around and we'll talk soon.